show in America that broadcasts live from the Middle East. It's Aaron Klein, Investigative Radio.
Continuing to unravel for this hour, the radical ties of, specifically, forget radical ties, the Ukraine ambassador, the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Bill Taylor, heavily tied to himself to the Burisma-funded Atlantic Council. Now, it's relevant for many reasons. And by the way, we didn't even get tonight to another star witness of Adam Schiff, Philip Rieker, testifying over the weekend. And Philip Rieker, guess who he was supposed to speak to this past week on Tuesday? The Atlantic Council, and then he canceled it, and then the Atlantic Council scrubbed the speech, or the announcement of the speech and his name from their website. So that's two Adam Schiff staffers now, two Adam Schiff witnesses tied to the Atlantic Council. But actually, there's an Adam Schiff staffer who right now, as we speak, serves on as a congressional fellow of the Burisma-funded Atlantic Council. And more than that, he took a trip sponsored by, and it was an Atlantic Council trip in August. And first of all, Joshua Klein, continuing with me, before we get to the timing of all of this, who did, when he first landed, this Adam Schiff staffer, again, being sent by the Atlantic Council, Burisma funded, which is scandalous, sent him to Ukraine. Who was his first meeting with?
Yes, on the itinerary, literally the first meeting that he met with was with none other than the ambassador, Bill Taylor himself.
The guy who just testified to Adam Schiff's committee. Now, wrap your head around that. Atlantic Council sends this staffer, his name's Thomas Eager, to meet to Ukraine, which is insane. Burisma-funded Atlantic Council. Adam Schiff has a staffer who went to Ukraine with the Atlantic Council, funded by the very agency that is at the center of the probe. He gets off the plane. His first meeting is with Bill Taylor. Now, I personally have inquired with Adam Schiff's office for many days, many emails asking, what did Bill Taylor and your staffer, Thomas Eager, talk about when he went to Ukraine on this trip financed by the Atlantic Council? And in fact, it was an Atlantic Council trip. Crickets, nothing, nada, not a word. They are not responding. And let me tell you, the guy has usually responded to me very quickly. This time, they're not saying anything. Now, why is the timing of this trip relevant?
Well, the timing of the trip is definitely relevant because 12 days before the trip, on August 12th, is when this quote-unquote whistleblower submitted his report, and supposedly, and this is really important because this just tells you, again, the nature of Adam Schiff and how truthful he is, and then when you press him, how truthful he really does become. So you have, 12 days before that complaint. Adam Schiff maintained that he knew nothing about this whistleblower. He didn't know anything was in the works. He didn't know that any of his staff or anything that met with him. He went on and he said that explicitly, actually, on MSNBC. He said, no, we have not spoken with them directly. He said he would like to. And then he tries to clean this up a couple weeks ago. I think it was around October 2nd or so. Actually, it was, a couple weeks ago. It was on CBS Face the Nation on Sunday. And Adam Schiff, he conceded, and he said, that he was not as clear as enough about his contact with the so-called whistleblower.
End of impeachment inquiry right there. It's over. He's a material witness in his own inquiry because he's the one, his staff, a mysterious staffer sent the so-called whistleblower to file the whole complaint to begin with. And then we don't know the name of that staffer. We do know the name of another staffer, or maybe the same, we don't know, sent to Ukraine by the Atlantic Council itself. But by the way, even let's just say it was 12 days, this trip by Thomas Eager, the Adam Schiff's effort to Ukraine 12 days after the whistleblower. This was a pre-planned trip. Maybe that wasn't enough time for him to have known anything, again, he happens to meet with his first meeting, Bill Taylor, the chief witness in all of this. That's insane. But didn't Adam Schiff's office know about this generally for a lot more than just a few days with this whistleblower? Wasn't there a little more going on beyond just a few days?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, his staffers met with the whistleblower.
But by then, wasn't that weird Soros-funded organization that no one ever heard of a few weeks earlier already put out all this reporting on Giuliani and Ukraine? So there's already enough going on that it's basically unbelievable that this Adam Schiff staffer didn't speak with Bill Taylor about all of that when he was there, sent by the Burisma-funded trip to Ukraine?
Yeah, so what you're referring to is on July 22nd, this organization called the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, OCCRP, which is heavily funded by Soros. I mean, where every page literally...
Oh, and by the way, we didn't even mention, but the Atlantic Council, by the way, is also funded by Soros, and it's also funded by Google, which separately also funds this reporting organization. And it's also funded by the Rockefeller brothers, and it's also funded by a section of the U.S. State Department, all interconnected funding between the Atlantic Council and the very agency that first put this stuff out that was then used in the whistleblower complaint.
And then even beyond that, it was actually a joint investigation with none other than BuzzFeed, the same organization that printed the dossier.
And that got it from David Kramer.
Yeah, it's all interconnected. It's all the same players. I mean, the deep state players know each other very well. They know how to play this game. They've been playing it for a very long time. It's not that random. I mean, as real investigative journalists, it's not that difficult. I mean, it's time-consuming, and, you do have to make the connections. But,
But there is no media, and so the Schiff and everyone is relying on the fact that almost no one's going to report this other than Breitbart and a few others. Actually, Breitbart, literally the only ones, were the ones breaking all of this. Joshua Klein, thank you so much for being here. And I have to let everybody know that up next, we are going to transition to the Kurds, to Syria, to Iran, to the elections in Israel, to Benghazi, which is tied to this because it was the Obama administration, never forget that put ISIS on steroids when they went into Libya and then failed to do anything in Syria. That being said, I'm deeply concerned about what's going on in Syria. It's very dangerous for the United States. It's going to put Iran on steroids, I think. And that could lead, mark my words, this could lead to a major escalation and maybe potentially an Iranian attack on Israel. And by the way, Lebanon is exploding, and you'll see why that's interconnected. And Iran is going to have to do something to change the topic. Stay tuned.